Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Crash Zoom. I'm Sammie Purcell, an associate editor with Rough Draft Atlanta, and I'm here with Aaron Strand, an indie filmmaker here in Atlanta. How have you been, Aaron?
Hey, Sammie, I'm doing all right. I am prepping for a little commercial shoot that I got going on tomorrow that I will be running as a one-man band. Always the best type of commercial shoots. Yep, 6:45 a.m. call time. So I am bracing myself to load up the hand truck and take my gear over to a undisclosed location. But otherwise, I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. As you might be able to tell from my voice, I'm recovering from a concert. I went to see Casey Musgraves in Nashville this weekend, so had a good time, but definitely on the mend right now. So hopefully you can all understand me in this raspiness. But
Yeah, your post celebratory raspiness. Well, how was the concert? I hope the
oh,
raspiness indicates how great it was.
it was so good. I love Casey. I'm a big fan, and this is probably the fourth or fifth time I've seen her. So, and it just gets better every time. I think she's great. She brought her dog out on stage. It was delightful. Great time. Before we dive into our news items this week, and I guess I should say what we do here on Crash Zoom if you're a new listener. So, Aaron and I, we discuss different news items that are going on in the industry in Hollywood, and we try to boil those down to an indie filmmaker level. So, the big industry news, what Bob Iger is doing, what David Zaslav is doing. We take all of those things and we try to just boil them down and explain why they matter to the small independent filmmaker. So that's what we do here on Crash Zoom. But we're adding a new intro segment this week, trying to liven things up a little bit before we get into the nitty gritty. So that segment, we're going to call it What Have You Been Watching for now. Maybe that name will change in the future. Who knows? But it is exactly what it sounds like. So, Aaron, I'll start with you. What have you been watching this week?
Yes, I've been watching some good stuff this week. I watched the famous French singer Serge Gainsbourg. He made of several films, but his first film was a mid-70s film named after a very popular album of his called Je t'aime moi non plus, or I love you me neither. It stars Jane Birkin and Warhol superstar Joe D'Alessandro, which is just like wild in and of itself. And the way I could describe it is that this is the most 2024 movie of 1976 because it is about Jane Birkin plays a like bushy eyebrowed tomboy who works in the middle of nowhere, France. And Joe D'Alessandro is a gay dump truck driver who like is a freelance. He like dumps trash with his boyfriend, and he walks in to use her truck stop one day, and they fall in love, but like he's gay and she's not so sure about it, and she has this boss who's this like old wino who like literally keeps farting. That's like part of the movie is he can't stop farting, and he keeps telling her he's gay, like you'll never be with him, but she like wants to be with him anyway. And I wouldn't call the movie great, but it is certainly like fascinating, and there's parts of it that are incredibly beautiful. It also looks like a very 2024 movie, like the just the color contrast does not look like a lot of the sort of overexposed independent films from the mid 70s. So this was like a real gem to kind of uncover in the mix of everything. Obviously, they both look incredible. Jane Birkin's beautiful.
Gosh.
Joe D'Alessandro looks better than ever. He's looks so good even in 1976, which is wild. He's also dubbed in French. So like there's so many weird things about this movie. But yeah, I think that would be my real highlight of the week. What about you?
Well, I've been watching a lot of stuff, trying to, get everything in and catch up on a few things and rewatch a few things this week. So yesterday, Sunday, from the day we're recording this, was the deadline to get in your ballot for the Atlanta Film Critics Circle Awards. So I had a lot to get in. I've probably talked about this movie before with you, definitely. I don't think on this podcast, but I rewatched Challengers yesterday, and I just love it so much. I can't get over how much I love the ending. If you haven't seen it yet, it's Luca Guadagnino's First of two films this year, but it stars Zendaya, Josh O'Connor, and Mike Feist as a sort of love triangle emerged in the tennis world. It's got a great score by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. It looks incredible. The last like 10 or so minutes is just this amazing, like high stakes, high intensity tennis montage that feels like sex almost. It's incredible. So, so good. I rewatched it again yesterday, like I said, and I just like, I can't get over it. It's awesome. It was not my top film of the year, no, but it did make my top 10. Everything's out now. All our winners are out. So it was not our top film of the year as a group, but I believe it did make the top 10 as well. So the Atlanta critics enjoyed Challengers quite a bit.
What did they put as number one?
Anora.
How do you feel about it?
Pretty good. It wasn't my number one either, but it was also on my list, so I'm not mad about it. My number one was Nickel Boys, which I really, really loved. It has not come out yet, so I won't say too much about it besides that, but I believe it's coming out, I think later this week. It's slated for somewhere in mid to late December, I believe.
Yeah. I think you might be right. Yeah. I will probably try to go see that. It looks the trailer looks very interesting. Some very inventive cinematography.
And he Jomo Frey, who's the cinematographer, did win our best cinematography award. So
awesome.
All right. Well, let's dive into some of the news topics this week. So starting us off here, Sugar 23 and Fifth Season are launching a brand-focused film and TV studio. So I picked up this news item from the Daily's newsletter. If you don't subscribe to them, they're great. And so basically, Sugar 23, which is a production management company, has teamed up with Fifth Season to launch a venture that will co-finance over $100 million in production with strategic brand partners over the next 3 years. So essentially, they're going to be producing scripted and non-scripted TV, as well as documentaries and feature films. And unlike traditional sponsorship deals, which that's something that happens all the time, this new deal will mean that brands get unprecedented creative involvement from development through production. So basically, it will give the brands power to kind of shape the narrative of the story and basically like become a huge part of the production. Whereas before you might see like, I don't know, Dakota Johnson holding a Pepsi can in something like Madam Web, which the Pepsi product placement in that movie is crazy. This would mean that Pepsi would have like an actual hand in shaping the narrative of Madam Web. So that's sort of where the difference is. So it essentially like turns brands into creators as far as I can tell, which I mean, I have a feeling I know what you're going to say about this, Aaron, but please tell me your thoughts about this.
Man, if you care about artistic empowerment and if you love original storytelling, this is absolutely terrifying. And I will tell you why. So let's give a little bit of context here and a little bit of historical context. So Sugar 23, this is Michael Sugar's management and production company. Michael Sugar, he had a string of hits in the mid-2010s. He was the producer on The Nick, 13 Reasons Why, and the show The OA. He also, his big claim to fame is that he won an Academy Award for producing the film Spotlight. Now, their partner in this, their partner in this, but all those were sort of like total mid 2010s peak TV streaming boom type of projects. Fifth Season, on the other hand, this is a production and a distribution company. It used to be called Endeavor Content. They trace their existence all the way back to the Endeavor Talent Agency, but after Endeavor Talent merged with William Morris, and then a WGA agreement said that talent agencies could not have a 20% holding stake within a production company, that it was a conflict of interest and led to unfair packaging fees. They had to divest from this company. So Endeavor Content then was rebranded as Fifth Season, but since 2018, they've produced a lot of films, and mostly in the sort of like mid-budget indie sort of space. They produced The Peanut Butter Falcon, Just Mercy, Bill and Ted Face the Music, Cherry, In the Heights, Pig, The Lost Daughter, and then their big claim on the TV side is that they produced Severance, Scenes from a Marriage, and most recently Lady in the Lake. And these two companies have had a tremendous amount of success over the past 6 years producing original art. But what this move is saying is they're coming together and saying, we can't do it anymore. We need to send our artists over to Starbucks Studios, to Chick-fil-A Studios, if they're going to get paid, and we're going to get our commission and packaging fee. This is absolutely terrifying. These mega corporations, which used to fund all of the TV that we loved through buying ads, are now looking at the streamers outside of Disney and Netflix. And that what they're seeing is that everyone's hemorrhaging money. They're not capturing audience attention. They're not being able to deliver targeted advertising as promised. And these companies are saying, well, shit, we've got a more captive audience than they do. And we've got this huge pile of money that we sure would like to write off on our taxes. So why don't we launch a creative studio? Now, let's talk about on the brand side of what they're even trying to do here. What do they want out of this deal? And it's, to me, this is like the worst of it all, because they don't want to make art or tell stories that accurately reflect the world that is around us, that we live in. They don't want to hold a mirror up to nature. They want to do two things. The first thing they want to do is they want to whitewash the blood and the exploitation that they have on their hands. All like Starbucks Studios is producing documentaries about like struggling coffee farmers. And all this is like, you remember how you go to Starbucks and there's a little sign that says like 50% or 50 cents of every cup of coffee goes to the starving coffee farmers in Ethiopia. And what this is doing is that, like, by participating in the capitalist system, you can balm the very ills that system is producing. You know what I mean? Like, it's like for the cost, as included in your cost in your cup of coffee is a healing effort toward the very problems that your cup of coffee is creating, which is just like an insane proposition. And so but Starbucks doesn't actually want to help the farmers in Ethiopia. They don't actually want to like pull people out of poverty and get them to unionize and hurt their bottom line. And so by making movies and documentaries about these things, they actually have found a more efficient way to accomplish the same whitewashing goal. And that isn't even it. Like, the content is ultimately immaterial to them, because what these real efforts really do is that they don't want the content. They want to set up the servers and the communication networks and the hardware and the data centers, and they want to track their customers. Those are the things that are the valuable investments to them, not storytelling and art. It's a total inversion of the traditional ad-supported entertainment that we used to enjoy, where TV stations actually made really good shows and that resonated in a meaningful way, and audiences would show up and companies would follow the audience and pay to get a little exposure to it. Now the companies say, screw your audience. We can do it better. We'll control our content. We'll save ourselves the headache of ever having to partner with an artist that has something edgy to say. And these production companies are saying, well, we need to pay our mortgages, and we will be happy to send our artists to work to you. This is so dark, Sammie. And honestly, like, to read this article where they're announcing this great new partnership that is
so innovative.
It is offensive. It is upsetting, and honestly, it is terrifying, because it paints a very dark future of where we are going.
I know. I think there's a quote from Michael Sugar in here, who, side note, and I know this is a little immaterial, but every time I think of the name Michael Sugar, I just think of Bob Sugar from Jerry Maguire, who sucks, and I get so mad. But anyway, so there's a quote from him in here. He says, "This is not about traditional sponsorship or quote unquote branded content. It's about brand funded entertainment," which is a phrase that I hate, that allows brands to play an active role in shaping the future of storytelling at the highest level, with brand purpose and audience impact at the center of the proposition. And I think what like really pisses me off is, like, obviously Spotlight is like one of the first things in this guy's resume. And I actually, speaking of what we've been watching, I just recently rewatched Spotlight, which is a movie that I quite love, like, as a journalist. And I know that he's like just a producer or whatever, like money is the bottom line, but like to see that movie named in this article as associated with this guy just like was sort of a downer for me. But what I, like you said, you know, like, this paints sort of a dark picture of what is on the horizon. And I wonder like how long it'll take for that to really set in. And I wonder how popular the, I'm going to say content, because I don't think it's art. I know we had that discussion last week on like Chick-fil-A's new streaming app or whatever shit is going to be thrown at us in the near future. Like, how popular is that stuff actually going to be?
Yeah, I think it's I think on the Chick-fil-A
Mm-hmm.
side, I think they have the potential to actually be quite popular. Because it's all about like
Yeah.
it speaks into this broader conversation around IP. Like why does IP dictate everything? Why does IP control everything in the entertainment industry? It's because IP is a promise to the audience that you are going to get a certain product when you walk in the door. We don't have the appetite for risk anymore because there's too many other things competing for our attention at any given time. So why would we risk the 2 hours of our day for an unknown when we could make that time and financial investment in something known?
Mm-hmm.
And the promise of Chick-fil-A, which has done this incredible job of, building up this brand equity that, is Christian, family friendly, safe,
Mm-hmm.
not nothing, you will encounter nothing controversial here.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people actually really want that from their entertainment, and I could see them being marginally successful with their Chick-fil-A, like their Chick-fil-A extended cinematic universe. But I think it's very dependent on the brand, though. I don't think Starbucks has the brand equity that anyone trusts enough that they would want to go like live in a Starbucks world and
I'm like,
enjoy
what
the.
even is a Starbucks? Like, it's like you said, I guess it's like the coffee documentaries about coffee farmers in Ethiopia.
Yeah,
But I
they're
just,
they're trying to do inspirational documentary content, a sort of like
mm-hmm.
an even more saccharine like Disney doc type of thing. Um, and which makes sense. They have this vision of people sitting in their coffee shops, talking about these documentaries and sipping coffee. But all of these are downstream problems of like the core issue of the entertainment industry, which is that we have a total
Mm-hmm.
imbalance between supply and demand. We have we have more supply than we've ever had before, and we have dwindling demand as people's attention is diverted elsewhere. And these are the byproducts. And look, like I get that you're sad about seeing Michael Sugar's name appear on Spotlight. I don't. I mean, I do have a little bit of empathy for him because, like, I think that both these companies are companies that have really tried to make it work. They have really tried to produce original content, but that's what makes it even sadder.
Well, I mean, that's like what makes me sad. It's not like it's the fact that like even something I don't like 13 Reasons Why, I'm like, okay, like, that was really popular. People really liked that. Like, what makes me sad is seeing things that are creative or actually creative or innovative or like works of art that I admire, like, just kind of like, well, that doesn't work anymore. So we have to like pivot to this. And I can imagine like being a young writer, like coming into this sort of environment and having to like, I don't know, having your like story co-opted by Chick-fil-A or whatever it might be. Like, it just sucks.
It totally sucks. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
even know. I would imagine that I don't know exactly how the relationship would go of like if they're being
Yeah.
tasked with the creative of sort of like their pitching projects to Chick-fil-A, or if Chick-fil-A is like coming to them uh,
Mm-hmm.
with projects that they have in mind, and then they're putting in orders for their writers to then execute. I mean, either
Mm-hmm.
way, like, yes, like this is what's so frustrating. The only studio that anyone is actually excited about working with in Hollywood today is Apple, because Apple is like the only studio that at this point has a proven track record of like trying to recreate the old 90s model of like we respect our creative, we pay the artists, we rely on the movie star system to like bankroll what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing, and it's totally not working. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
like Wolves was the I mean, I don't think we're a little past canary in the coal mine, but Wolves was a major blow to everything that Apple has been trying to do since they launched Apple TV Plus. To be an artist within the space, knowing that this is what you're going to be working towards, this is how you're going to be able to afford your apartment every month, is pitching to Chick-fil-A studios, is a
Hmm.
really dystopian vision of the future. And unfortunately, it's already here.
Yeah, and we'll get into this a little later on this episode too, I think, but like how can I almost like can't really blame anyone who's like struggling to put food on the table for either like deciding, yes, okay, I'll buy in so I can like keep affording to be able to do this and perhaps one day make something that I'm actually proud of, or just like leaving altogether. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to blame people for making either choice.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I part of me, I think like the audience and like the populace like need to look at themselves, um,
Yeah.
and sort of what we have as a country, as a marketplace, have sort of like shifted towards. But the entertainment industry has, time and time again, because of greed, and I want to be very clear about this, like because of their insatiable need for growth, their decision to try to compete with tech companies, and the fact that all of these studios are part of publicly traded conglomerates that have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to
Hmm.
create ever increasing piles of money. They have undercut the power and the benefit of original storytelling at almost every turn. And we've also just, with the market dynamics of supply and demand, have totally caved in on themselves. And so, part of me is sort of like, this is what another part of me is like, this is what the entertainment industry deserves, frankly.
You deserve Michael Sugar. So let's move on. I don't have a good segue. I really was trying to think of one, but I don't have a good one. So we're moving on to AI, like we are wont to do. But this is sort of an interesting one. So this is from Puck. The article is entitled ScarJo's AI Legacy. And if you'll remember, this happened earlier this year, which is kind of funny because, of course, ScarJo famously played the voice of AI in Spike Jonze's Her. But essentially, an updated version of Chat GPT had a voice that was eerily similar to ScarJo's, and she essentially sent a cease and desist letter to OpenAI. And OpenAI quickly denied the accusation. There was a lot of back and forth there, and ScarJo didn't actually ever sue. I mean, maybe she will in the future, but she didn't actually sue OpenAI, just sent that cease and desist letter. But it seems the floodgates are now open. So, voice actor Paul Lerman is now heading a class action lawsuit in New York against Lovo Inc., which is an AI voice generator, for allegedly cloning his voice alongside the voices of others like Barack Obama, Elton John. Scarlett Johansson is also included in this list as well. And this Park article basically speculates that this is going to be like a very important AI court case once a decision is made. So the Puck article speculates that out of all the claims that Lerman has sort of made in his lawsuit, two of them are probably going to have the most traction. So the first is the right of publicity, which is meant to protect someone's name, portrait, picture, likeness, and voice. And the second are Lerman's assertions under the Lanham Act, which is a federal law aimed at protecting brands by guarding against consumer confusion about the source of a product or service. So if there's any kind of confusion about the source of this particular voice, then that could kind of work in his favor. There's a quote in this article, though, and I kind of want to get into what you think because I feel like we've been saying this kind of when we've been discussing copyright as well, that if Lerman doesn't succeed, the lesson may be that it's difficult to apply old laws to new technology. And this is sort of what I've been thinking the whole time. Like, what can we do besides like come up with new laws and kind of new codes of the way to approach this thing if the old ones don't really apply or work when you're applying them to AI? So I wondered if you had any thoughts about that.
You hit the nail on the head. The complete, like, this new paradigm that we are in is exposing all of these new opportunities to sort of create some kind of like reasonable structure through which people can expect to participate in the marketplace and get paid for their services. And like, look, the sort of reactionary and sort of like a leftist reactionary sort of position to this would be to create this like preemptive regulatory state, sort of like what the EU does. And I don't think that is I don't think that is the answer. I mean, there's a reason why like every technology company like comes from the United States and not the European Union. The European Union regulates their technology companies into non-existence, and often in a very backwards way. So look, I think this is like this is not necessarily like the sky is falling, but I hope that this is like a real opportunity to carve out some new legal protections and to differentiate between AI and voice actors. To a couple things that I wanted to respond to in your introduction. First of all, as an addition to the whole like Scarlett Johansson OpenAI, I'm sorry, I can't call her ScarJo. I just can't do it. The Scarlett Johansson OpenAI thing is that yes, they used a voice that was almost like hers, but this is after months of Sam Altman personally begging her to
do it.
The voice of ChatGPT in order to recreate her character from the dystopian film Her, which is like such a classic example of these fucking tech bros confusing dystopian art for like empowering cool things that they want to recreate in the world. Which
after she said no, like multiple times.
Yeah, so he kept coming back. We want you to do this. We'll pay you more. We'll pay you more. She finally said, no, I don't want to do this. This is not going to be my legacy. And so they just turn around and make a replica of her voice in a public presentation, which is ultimate cringe behavior. Anyway, so she sent her cease and desist notice. Now, this poor guy, Paul Lerman, I feel so sorry for this guy. Like, I mean, he's being placed along this class action lawsuit along names like Barack Obama and Elton John.
I was going to say, he's like, I had never heard of him before. I had to look him up, but
dude, it's so messed up how he got embroiled in this in the first place.
I know.
He's a poor voiceover actor who took a job on Fiverr. He is the bottom of the totem pole. And listen, as somebody who has sought out freelance work on Fiverr, I can attest it is a dark place. You know you are struggling when you are searching for voiceover opportunities on Fiverr, and you're seeing how like there's like 10,000 people in India who will undercut you like your hourly rate in a second flat. So like it is a humbling position to be in. So he saw this advertisement on Fiverr where an anonymous user was saying, we need voiceover content for academic research. And when he said, what's the research? They responded, LOL, we can't disclose what the research is. And he sent over like 120 examples of his voice for what he thought was academic research. And I'm sure he got paid pennies to do so. It's on Fiverr.
Yeah.
Only to turn around and hear his cloned voice on a podcast 4 years later, and he had to deduce it himself that this is what happened. It was this random user on Fiverr that took his voice, cloned it, and is now reselling it on an AI. Now this gets so dark because the reason voice acting is not protected under copyright, like it is, but only the recording itself is protected under copyright. The person, the individual's voice, the unique quality of their voice is not, because it's never had to be. Like, what other situation can you ever think of where someone's voice would be stolen in this way? So the recording is protected, but usually in these agreements, it is a work for hire contract, which means that the actor does not control the copyright for that voice recording. It is the production company that records the recording of that voice, and the only copyrightable thing in the exchange. So technically, the random user on Fiverr who hired him owns the copyright to his voice recording and is now using it to recreate the very voice that is going to prevent him from ever working in VO again. Because why would you pay Paul Lerman when you can go to Lovo Inc. and for a monthly subscription you get unlimited access to his voice? It is isn't one of the Disney fairy tales, doesn't it involve someone's like an evil witch stealing someone's
The Little
voice?
Mermaid.
Yes, The Little Mermaid. Exactly.
Come on.
God,
Have you
Thank
not
you.
gotten
Thank
deep
you.
into that one yet?
I just rewatched The Little Mermaid a few months
Yeah.
ago with my daughter, which is like why it was sort of
Mhm.
fresh in my mind. You got to find somebody to kiss real quick. Uh, no, yeah, literally, like they should call this the Ursula clause. That's what I think they should. They should mount They should brand this. If the lawyer was smart, he would brand this as the Ursula defense. And that
Yeah.
if any company doing this, this is Ursula behavior. We all know that Ursula is bad. And that's how I would approach this.
Yeah, well, so this is all kind of taking place in New York, which I think has like pretty sort of not very strong laws on this sort of thing to begin with. But towards the end of this article, they talk about a bill that was actually passed in the wake of the ScarJo OpenAI kind of back and forth that requires clear contracts for the creation and use of digital replicas, nullifying any agreement for someone's voice or likeness that doesn't specify intended use. And I wonder if that could help him at all. So I guess this bill is on the governor's desk right now. It landed over the weekend and she has 10 days to sign it or it dies. So like we'll see what happens with that. But
But
I
but
just
that's only calling out the deceptive practices of these AI companies that in their
for sure.
infancy scraped data in the dark before anyone could say otherwise, and then launched all their products.
I know, but there's still like if that passes, like will the environment in New York change, you know? Like who knows if it'll help him, but perhaps, you know, moving forward there'll be a more favorable environment for this sort of thing. But like you said, I just think like this poor guy so desperate for work and then immediately just ends up like sort of embroiled in this thing.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
listen, like I did not look up Paul Lerman before this episode. I know nothing about this man, but I certainly know what it looks like to search for a job on Fiverr. And I
Yeah.
just want to like paint this picture because it's like as a struggling artist myself in the like the dark world of freelance, and especially like as an actor it's even darker because you are operating in a world of like nothing but bottom feeders, and you are trying to
Mhm.
bring in just a little bit of income and engage in this art form that you made the horrible mistake of falling in love with when you were 16 years old, and you are still holding on to the dream of like being able to pay your bills through this art form. Like you are somebody who is disrespected, who is not considered, who is looked down upon, who is derided by your family, who is judged by your friends, and who is literally operating your life like a crazy person because you are holding on to a dream. It makes these people incredibly vulnerable, and I have a huge amount of empathy for the people that like continue to put one foot in front of the other and stay on
Mhm.
that path. And I can only imagine that this is something of this man's story. And so to hear
Yeah.
him be, because it's like, look, it's hard for me. Like, I think it's wrong, but it's a little harder for me to shed a tear over Barack Obama's voice being cloned. I mean, it's like his voice is everywhere, anywhere. And like, plus like he's over there cashing checks from Netflix. Like, he fine. But like when I hear about Paul Lerman, like my heart goes out for Paul Lerman.
Mhm.
I love Paul Lerman. I am rooting for Paul Lerman, and I want Paul Lerman to get a fat settlement check. That means he never has to go on Fiverr again.
I hope so too. I was going to say, you know, speaking of some of the bigger names in that list, it is interesting to me, and I've said this before, I'm not a lawyer. It's interesting to me that ScarJo hasn't sued, and I haven't been really following like the specifics of that case. Just sort of been watching out for, you know, if she does sue at some point. But after the success she had in that Disney lawsuit, I would be like a little worried if I were any sort of like, and I don't know if everyone remembers that. It was basically like a contractual thing of Black Widow that I can't remember the specifics, but it had to do with essentially a clause in her contract that I believe necessitated some sort of like money on the back end from theatrical release, but because of like the COVID-19 pandemic and everything that happened within all that, I would have to look that up. I wasn't really prepared to speak on the specifics of that, but she did end up winning the lawsuit. And I think any sort of like major company would be a little bit like wary of her, which makes it laughable to me that they did this in the first place. But the fact that she has not kind of moved forward sort of makes me, non-lawyer, think that her lawyers don't think she would win. Does that kind of track for you?
Against OpenAI, like
Yeah.
specifically, or against this low? Because I mean, she's part. I think she's.
She's part of the class action, but I'm speaking about the other one against OpenAI.
Yeah, well, they OpenAI like immediately retracted their facsimile voice, and it was a bit of a PR like blunder for them. Not that it's like really
Okay.
hurt their momentum at all.
Yeah.
I mean, OpenAI is about to become one of the most valuable companies in the entire world. I don't know why. Like, if I was Sam Altman, I'd just slip her a check for 20 million to just say like, hey, let's just let bygones be bygones. He's got the
Maybe.
cash.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know why. I have no idea other than that, like, OpenAI pretty much immediately kind of reversed
Retracted.
course, and because they ended up looking like a bunch of like weirdo nerds, which is the one thing they don't want to look like, which is what they are, is a bunch of
They are
weirdo
weirdo
nerds.
nerds.
I think Sam Altman's totally creepy. And so he doesn't want to look creepy. He wants to look cool, and like he wants to brand himself as like the next futuristic genius, a la Elon Musk. And so
Sure.
he can't have hot, cool, powerful women of Hollywood calling him a weird nerd. And so I think that is why she has not continued to pummel them.
Well, speaking of weirdo nerds,
Oh my God.
I
What a
was really
segue.
excited when you said that. But
Yes. Oh man,
um,
that was fantastic.
this quite awesome, funny profile of Ben Mezrich hit Vulture earlier this month, really. So last month, it came out in November, but I just kind of like got a hold on it last week and just thought it was hysterical and so well written and really, I think, informative about, Ben Mesrich. Ben Mesrich. That's a really hard name to say plurally.
I think it's
Ben
Ben Mezrich. I think it's pronounced Ben
Ben
Mezrich.
Mezrich. That
I
helps
think
me
it's
so
Mezrich.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ben Mezrich's so much easier. Philosophy just towards, getting his quote unquote books. I'm going to say quote unquote books onto the screen. So basically, if you don't know who Ben Mezrich is, he wrote the books that became the movies 21, The Social Network, I think most notably, and also Dumb Money. And he's a really interesting guy because he is essentially the only reason, and he's said this, like, I really don't think anything I can say about him he hasn't said about himself, which is kind of what makes him fascinating. But he is essentially writing these books to become movies, often writing them at the same time as the script is being written. I think that's what happened with The Social Network. So his books will often get optioned off of like book proposals, essentially. And he's really open about this sort of philosophy that he has, that he like always says he never wanted to win a Pulitzer. He never wanted to like be like a really high-minded guy. He just wanted to have, I think it was what he said, he wanted to have the moniker like now a national motion picture or whatever, like a motion picture, whatever, major motion picture, if that's the word. He always wanted to have that like splashed across the title page of his books. So he's just a really interesting guy. Maybe kind of a nuisance to everyone around him. But what are your sort of thoughts about Ben Mezrich in general? Are you like a Social Network fan, a Dumb Money fan, any of those movies?
I am a Social Network fan.
Yeah.
I unabashedly think The Social Network is great. But
Have you read
having
those
said,
books?
I would not be caught dead reading a Ben Mezrich. I have
Which is so funny
absolutely.
because men are his, as this article points out multiple times, his demographic is man.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
He is the number one purveyor of dicklit.
Yeah.
I have zero respect for his literary ability. I find him to be a trashy fast food author who writes the Da Vinci Code about billionaires. That's all he does. He writes
Oh,
Da
yeah.
Vinci Code level pseudo histories that are branded as nonfiction. He's in the nonfiction section, but he makes up everything that's in his books.
So many things.
He's in the nonfiction section, so it's Da Vinci Code, but with like modern billionaires.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, just to, like he goes into detail in this Vulture article breakdown about his process, which is that he when he comes across an idea that fits into his oeuvre, he essentially writes he writes the first 10 pages of the book. He usually like adds in sex, drugs, and an exotic location for just
Mhm.
because it's more cinematic.
He
Um,
loves the term exotic location.
it's
Loves an
mentioned
exotic
like 10
location.
times in the article. Yeah,
Yeah.
sex, drugs, exotic location, and he then fleshes out a neat little 3-act narrative structure, and he goes and pitches it to film companies and gets the book deal off of his deal with the film
Mhm.
company.
Mhm.
So, look, what he's doing to me, Ben Mezrich is cravenly exploiting two critical issues in the entertainment ecosystem chain. And like how this applies to like the everyday artist is that, look, these are opportunities that anyone can take advantage of, and you don't have to take advantage of them as cravenly as Ben Mezrich does. But
Mhm.
here are the two problems in my estimation. The first is the there is a huge narrative hole, a lack of depictions of aspirational masculinity within film and TV. The masculine representation is overwhelmingly on the side of sort of unrealistic ideals, i.e., superheroes, or essentially like human characters that are superheroes in and of themselves. Um, so a large section of the male population does not have sort of aspirational role models to look to, and I think you can look to sort of like the political shifts in this country, young men gravitating towards the Donald Trump and Joe Rogan and Elon Musk
Mhm.
and all of these like essentially content creators who are painting an image of aspirational masculinity as symptoms of this narrative vacuum. And Ben Mezrich is one of the few people who has consistently capitalized on this. He always writes stories about aspirational young men disrupting the establishment and making billions of dollars in the process. And then he throws in the sex and drugs and exotic locations to just be sort of like the icing on the cake. So that's one side of it, is that he is tapping into an underserved market. The other thing is that Mezrich is very proud of how quickly he can crank out these books.
Oh yeah.
He even says that like Facebook actively tried to stop the Accidental Billionaires from being written, and he proudly boasts, "But they don't know how I write. I wrote that book in 4 weeks." And
Well, really 11,
while
but
yeah, really 11, but that's what he claims. Now, he's
yeah.
doing that by like, totally disregarding facts. He has no interest in the truth with a capital T. He's interested in sort of the emotional truth, I guess, if you're being generous to him. Um, he's really not concerned with writing at all. He has absolutely zero respect for anything literary. But what this is speaking to is that this is a huge problem within the film world, which is that there is such a huge lag time for 99% of writers out there who are overly concerned
Mm.
with writing to turn current events into films. And uh, his ability to crank this stuff out is a secret power, and he has weaponized it by inverting the traditional model of the book to film sort of distribution system, and instead he goes
Mhm.
film to book, and he has no qualms about quality, and it enables him to sort of like stay true to this very fast system. But all that to say is that like these two problems are addressable and exploitable from people that are not Ben Mezrich. And that's what I really got from this article, because the article painted him as just a total nerdy douchebag. This is a guy that grew up in
Yeah.
Princeton, New Jersey. His entire family is specialized doctors. He went to Harvard. He felt like an outsider at Harvard. The entire portrait of Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network is just him. And he is just a weird nerd that's been on the outside fantasizing about what cool guys do and writing it,
Yeah.
and creating this fanfic of like cool guy billionaires that millions of people across the world have now like lapped up, and frankly we're living in Ben Mezrich's universe.
Everything that you've said is right, but it's just so interesting to me how completely forthright he is about everything. Like there's a part in this article where like it's talking about like, his sort of like feelers and invite to like people to like give him cool stories, and how he kind of like gets to convincing, you know, people who might have like a sensitive story or a sensitive topic to talk about, is he's essentially just like, well, if you want to say, if you don't like what I write, just say you didn't talk to me. Like everyone will believe you. like, like he's just so, this guy is so forthright. It's like almost really disarming. You know what I mean? Like there's another great, the kicker of this article is just incredible. So he's working on a book about a chess match right now, a book proposal, I guess I should say, about a chess match now. And the two central figures of this proposal of this book are playing each other again in Paris. And he was like all excited about it. Like, oh, this will, whatever happens, this will be like the perfect ending to my book. So he's planning a trip to Paris. And this writer is sort of like, oh, I probably can't go to Paris. Like, I'm kind of agonizing. This might also be the perfect ending for my article. Like, oh, I'm so mad I can't go. And Ben Mezrich just tells the writer, well, you can still write it. That's what I would do. What's the difference? Like, so I don't know. He is like a really disarming person to me. And I do think, I think the second part of what you said is like really what is sort of the main takeaway for me here is that like, and maybe that's why like these, the movies that his books kind of turn into work for me for the most part. I haven't seen 21 in a long time. I saw it when I was quite young. But like, it's because there's really not that much of like a break in between, right? Like, and we've had this conversation before, I think, about like, you know, something like, thinking of the latest Zoe Kravitz movie that just came out, Blink Twice. Like it spent so much time in development. For me, it felt like kind of really 2016, 2017 feminism instead of like where we are now. And like that's just like a byproduct of the movie making process, right? But even if, and I've never read a Ben Mezrich book either, but I've heard they are quite bad. So even if they are bad, like you put them in the hands of like someone like Aaron Sorkin or David Fincher, who are like quite good at what they do. Your mileage may vary on Sorkin, but like quite good at what they do. And they are able to like pull something out of it that is like so worthwhile and so interesting. And I don't know if there's any way to like cut him out of that equation, but like that is sort of, I think, what's interesting about it.
The turnaround time from the actual Roaring Kitty squeeze on GameStop to
Oh my
Dumb
God.
Money, it was
So
like
quick.
16 months. And
Yeah.
like, listen, it is fair. Yes, it is fair to say that like the film industry just has a lag time and like always has. But this particular film industry that we inhabit is a horrific situation if you're trying to say anything
Mm-hmm.
relevant about the world
Yeah.
at any given time. I mean, you need to look no further than the movies that were being cranked out in the 19 teens, the 1920s, the 1930s even. And the ability that studios and artists had to whip things out within a matter of weeks, to the point where like Charlie Chaplin would struggle with releasing a film and then having his copycat impersonators release a copycat film like literally within 10 days of his film being released. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of amazing how quickly you could turn things around when you were less attached and like more free, and there was less like people who made their money out of being a roadblock to the creative process and calling it
Yeah.
development. So I think that the lag time is a symptom of the bloated
Sure.
and problematic structure. And look, like the entertainment industry is so frustrating because like it creates false false roadblocks in all the wrong places. We have
Mm-hmm.
so many roadblocks within the actual mechanism chain of getting a movie made, because at every roadblock someone is essentially demanding a fee to like get it over that roadblock. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
like that's how business works, right? Like you only pay to solve a problem. You're not going to pay for anything else. So people create these totally non-existent problems in sort of like getting a movie made, and yet still at the end of it all we have an oversupply of movies, and we have too many things that are too infinitely available at all times of the day, which creates an oversupply and decreases the value of any given piece of art. And really, the roadblocks should be on the supply side, and we should be creating essentially an artificial scarcity, just like luxury brands do with any of their purses or luxury cars or whatever, to drive up the value. Anyway, that's like a sort of another tangent. But all that to say is that Mezrich's ability, um, Mezrich's ability to sort of weaponize the problems of the industry and carve out this really unique for himself, it is amazing. And you're right. Like, the most redeeming thing about him is his self-awareness. But like,
He is so like whatever. Like he doesn't care. He doesn't give a shit. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
But like, there's a lot of self-aware douchebags that
Oh,
like
sure. It doesn't take away from anything that you said. I was just like, I was kind of floored by how like open he was about who he is. You know what I mean?
oh yeah, totally. No
Yeah.
qualms.
No qualms at all. And the other thing, I'll just say this one last thing because I know I mentioned it before, kind of talking about like, well, if you could succeed at this, wouldn't you? And the writer again sort of has, I think this is a really well written article. Also, I want to shout out the journalist. Simon Van Zulian Wood is a features writer in New York.
Who Mezrich, in the middle of like in his interview, tells the writer of the article that he's wasting his time with this stupid article, and that like if you can't make a movie out of it, what's even the point? Because you're not going to make any money. Like, you're an idiot. Mm-hmm. He literally called his own profiler an idiot for writing the profile on him.
I don't know how I would have responded to that, but kudos to this guy. But there's kind of a paragraph towards the end here where he's like, you know, I've spent enough time with this guy. It's impossible to not like consider if I could do what he does, wouldn't I do it? Like, you know, if I could I think the exact quote is, if you could put a child or two through college by selling a single 15-word document you dreamed up in a weekend, if you could fudge a few details and make it to Hollywood, might you do it too? And I do think that is like an interesting, it puts people in such a conundrum, right? Like, it's just it's interesting to me.
Ben Mezrich, weird guy.
Weird guy.
Weird guy.
Completely not normal. Yeah.
He's a weird guy. I would sum this whole thing up by saying Ben Mezrich, weird guy.
All right. So moving on to not a weird guy, as far as I can tell, and a guy with a much bigger problem, I would say, than Ben Mezrich. So this is from The Wrap. And it's from a series that they've been doing called Holding On in Hollywood, which is pretty interesting. They're just kind of speaking to different people within the industry. Obviously, I mean, we've talked about it on this podcast. This industry is a very tough place to be right now. So they're kind of, you know, taking a look at different people within the industry and different career paths and talking to them about how they're, quote unquote, holding on. So this story in particular is titled, "A Dolly Grip Says, I don't know how long this career can sustain itself." So this is a dolly grip named Diego Mariscal. I think I'm saying that correctly. And he's a San Diego native. He works in the film industry. And it's just been really difficult to hold on to this career as, you know, more work is leaving LA and work is getting kind of more scarce and scarce since COVID and, of course, the strikes. And something that really kind of hit me specifically about this story, a little bit of a personal connection. One of my dad's friends is a dolly grip and has been doing it for quite some time. He's a bit older, and he, you know, it's really taken a toll on his body, and, you know, but it's also the only thing that he does. He's also a musician, so he has that kind of in his back pocket too, but this has sort of been like a big part of his career and his life. And kind of declining health and also the lack of work has sort of like really made that a hard thing for him to continue doing. And this quote towards the beginning of this article kind of really stuck out to me. It's a quote. Diego says, "I never went to college. I really have no other skills. It's a very specialized thing that I do as a dolly grip, being able to move an 800-pound dolly to a 3-ton camera crane and getting it in a specific place. No one really cares about it outside of this industry." And that just made me think specifically sort of about crew people who don't really have or might not have, I'm not saying this is everyone, but might not have much to fall back on, and how like this sort of slowdown is really kind of hitting a lot of crew people super, super hard.
The biggest thing for me about Diego's bio you left out is that he runs crew stories on Facebook and Instagram. Do you follow?
Yeah, he does.
Stories?
I am familiar. Yeah, I was gonna get to that, but yeah, he does run crew stories, which is pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so yes, he's struggling, but I mean, he runs Crew Stories, which if you're not following Crew Stories, what are you doing? It's like, I mean, yes, it's sort of like an film industry meme page, but people post really interesting and hilarious stuff, and
Hmm.
heartbreaking stuff, and kind of like the full gamut. If you want like a really a microscopic view, an honest view of what crew members are experiencing, the good, the bad, and the ugly, Crew Stories is like the greatest resource on the internet. I think I've been
Yeah.
following it. I think I started following it right when COVID hit. So right in 2020, which is like a couple years after it started. It's kind of interesting. He talks about like he started it as a place, as like a meme page and like a place for people to post just
Hmm.
like jokes and like silly things that happened. And it transitioned
It's
into this
completely
like,
blown up too.
yeah, this
Yeah.
communal space for people to share their struggles. And they, you know, they post all sorts of like fundraisers for people who have gotten hurt or people who've gotten laid off, and
Hmm.
like it's become this incredible community resource. And it's amazing. Diego in the article talks about how he feels that this he never asked for this sort of responsibility of like managing this thing, but
Hmm.
he has embraced it, and you know, now is using that platform to organize in-person events, and he's found other ways to like work with his hands for those in-person events, and has found meaning through all that. He really comes across as like a pretty inspiring figure. Unfortunately, you know, the struggle that he's facing is felt by thousands of other people, who,
Hmm.
you know, did not find themselves at the like helm of a popular crew Instagram meme page.
Yeah, kind of jumping off of that, and I know we had another story kind of teed up for this that Aaron wasn't able to read because of the wrap. The wrap is behind a paywall, which is on me. I should have thought about that.
Oh wow,
But
totally calling me out for my broke boy status, Sammy. Jeez,
sorry,
put me
sorry,
on
sorry, sorry,
blast.
sorry. But
Put me
I
on
was
blast
just
for
gonna
not
say,
subscribing to the rap. God,
no, no, you don't have to
embarrassed. Well,
subscribe to the
maybe
wrap.
I'll just need to book a few more
But
jobs on Fiverr and I can finally afford it.
I'm sorry, but I wanted to kind of take a look at some of. I think this whole series that they're doing, even though it is behind a paywall, they should do. Can you do the thing? This is a total tangent. The New York Times does that thing where you can like share an article. I wonder if you can do that with the wrap. Should figure that out.
Mm,
But they're doing this whole series again, holding on in Hollywood, and something that I found, and like I'm trying to do more of this in my own writing as well. I've like got a couple stories lined up, but like speaking to people sort of like outside of the typical like writer, director, you know, outside of that kind of like purview, actor included in there too. Not that those people aren't important and not that they're like not also struggling, but this series has talked to people from hairdressers to dolly grips to an AD to this guy who was a sitcom writer and then turned to be a psychologist who tries to like help, people working in the industry kind of like work through all this stuff. And I think especially probably not for you because you're more inside it, but especially for like people on the outside or on the outskirts kind of looking in, like it's important to remember exactly how many people are affected by the slowdown. Like it's not just actors, it's not just directors, it's people like from the bottom up. And I think that the rap doing this series is just a really cool and interesting way to sort of remind us to remember those people as well. And kind of moving us into our last little article here. So there's not too much about this one out there, but we figured we could chat about it. Just to give you a brief picture of what's going on here. Picturestart, which is a film and TV production company run by former Lionsgate executive Eric Feig, just let go of its president. I'm not sure how you pronounce this. I believe it's Sammy, so I'm going to say that. Sammy Kim Falvey. So this is a company that I think they started, I believe, in like 2018. Picturestart did, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me on that if I'm wrong. But in that time, they've had like quite a cool slate of movies, I think, even if I don't like all of them. So we've got Theater Camp, Sharper, which was a Sebastian Stan vehicle. Theater Camp is something that I, as a former theater kid, really loved. Cha Cha Real Smooth, which was a pretty big indie, Unpregnant on HBO Max. I'm not going to go through all of them, but a pretty cool slate. And they've got a couple in the works as well. but they just let their president, Falvey, go. So, yeah, I mean, we were kind of talking about this off mic, but this is kind of one in a slew of what feels like female executives being let go, which is a little disappointing, but wanted to kind of get your thoughts on this briefly.
Yeah, I think we need to keep a running list of the number of
Yeah.
female executives that are being fired in this year. I mean, I think it's interesting because it's like, everyone loves to tout like when they hire not just another middle-aged white guy,
Mm,
but they don't like to talk about when they fire everyone but the middle-aged white guy
yeah.
from their company, and it seems to be
Mhm.
happening a lot. Yeah, I mean, this is all sort of like still sort of rumor, like on her LinkedIn page
Yeah, there you go.
as of right now, like she's still listed as president. So, we'll be tracking this, but like, I think this really ties back to uh, what we were talking about with the first article with Michael Sugar and Sugar
Mhm.
23, that like Picturestart spun out of Lionsgate, you know, look like Eric Feig had spent his entire career. He got his break producing I Know What You Did Last Summer, and he was
Yeah.
the one who brought Twilight to Lionsgate, and he's the one who brought Hunger Games to Lionsgate and Divergent, and he was like his YA was like his thing, and like how he made his name and his money, and he wanted to go out and make something more artistic, and they tried to make more artistic stuff. Through Picturestart, and they are just as much victims of the market dynamics and the shifting financial realities of the entertainment industry as anybody else. And it's just more evidence that these people who tried to carve out the mid-budget success story for themselves are finding it not possible to continue. And look, like all of this is downstream of the internet. If there's anything that we know that the internet does, is that it creates a barbell around anything artistic and creative. And what I mean by that is
Mhm.
that you can only survive on the two ends. Everything gets squeezed to the ends, just like a barbell. The very, very big players, your Taylor Swifts, your Marvel movies, your Disney IP can survive. The very, very, very small players at the far end of the category that have no overhead, that are relating one-on-one with an audience, they can survive and like make a little bit of money on the internet. But the internet and its zero cost distribution system crushes the middle of everything. We've seen this at first. It came for the written word, it came for print, then it came for music, and now it's coming for film. And the stories that we've focused on this week really highlight this effect. And I genuinely don't know how mid-budget filmmaking survives.
Thanks for pointing out that this is a rumor. So this was in a Puck newsletter. So, still waiting on details for that. But yeah, I don't know. It just sucks. I don't know what else to say about this. Like it really just sucks.
It does suck. There's a lot of sucky things to think about in this industry this week. I'm gonna have to go watch some more mid 70s French stuff with Joe D'Alessandro to really palate cleanse my palate here.
Yeah, and we've talked about trying to be a little more hopeful maybe in the future, so you might see some of that coming your way down the line, but for now, we'll leave you with that sucks.
That sucks, Sammy.
That sucks. But
Yeah.
hopefully it can get better. Yeah. Maybe
I
I'll go
don't.
watch some mid-70s French cinema. Sounds good to me.
Je t'aime
Yeah.
moi non plus. I can't recommend it enough. It's on Canopy, one of the most undersung streaming services out there. Love Canopy. Canopy, you do not suck.
No, you don't. I love Canopy. Do you like it more than Tubi? I'm a big Tubi girl.
I like Canopy way more than Tubi.
More than Tubi? Hmm.
Yeah, I will. Um, I use if there's something that's only available on Tubi, I will use alternative means of finding the films that I want.
Wow.
Confession.
Is it an ad
Um,
problem? Like interface problem?
it's an ad problem.
Ad problem. Yeah, I
Yeah,
get it.
I
Hmm.
listen. Like, I mean, that's the problem, right? Is that like I'm over here proclaiming like we need more ad supported content because subscription fees cannot pay for like the quality
Mhm.
of filmmaking that we deserve, and yet over here I'm like dodging ads on
Oh, yeah.
sketchy websites.
Using ad blockers on YouTube, just the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. But anyway, Canopy, love you. Keeping the library system alive in the digital age. If you don't have Canopy, you get it through a library card. Go to the library, dog.
It's
Get yourself a
true. That is
library
pretty
card.
awesome. That is the coolest part about Canopy, that's for sure. I think that's all we got for this week. Do you have anything you want to plug?
I don't have anything to plug coming up. As always, you can follow us at Behind the Slate Pod. And actually, I think I'm going to just go ahead and seed this here. We're going to be launching our own podcast feed, our own Crash Zoom podcast feed. We are going to divest from Behind the Slate Pod. We're just going to separate the two podcasts. So this will be going on its own feed. So we'll have more info, I think, probably next week on like where all that will be and plus like new handles and everything like that. But you can look forward to that. In the meantime, you can follow us at Behind the Slate Pod on Instagram and on TikTok at Behind the Slate Pod. You can email us crashzoompod@gmail.com. That's crashzoompod@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And
Yes.
I think that's all we have here. Anything else that I'm forgetting, Sammie?
No, I think that's it. Thanks everyone for listening, and we're excited to see you next week.
Bye.